cannot help but feel that the bag of holding that we have in 5th edition is a fake. GameMasters here, and today I want to explore one of the most famous magical items to ever be found in the game of Dungeons & Dragons, the Bag of Holding. This is a bag that touts to be able to lighten the load of any adventurer. One can shove all kinds of things inside, from gold to weapons. Of course, the entire point of the bag back then was to avoid a mechanic known as encumbrance. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at the original Bag of Holding. Back in what is referred to as the White Books, specifically Volume 2, Monsters and Treasures, the entry for the Bag of Holding reads, "A sack-sized magical bag, which will contain 10,000 gold pieces as if they were only 300. Objects up to 10-foot length and 5-foot width and 3-foot height may be stuffed into the bag, but the weight equivalent, regardless of the weight of the object, then becomes 600. Now, as we mentioned, this bag was an attempt to lighten the load and alleviate some of the penalties for basic movement and encumbrance. The first volume, Men in Magic, broke down everything based on the weight of a single coin, with a coin of copper, silver, or gold being one. What it doesn't do is define what that one means. It's certainly not 1 pound, but from the description of the Bag of Holding, we do know that it makes 10,000 coins have the weight of just 300 coins. By the time that the basic edition came out, we would get a defined clarification of what 300 coins would weigh, roughly 30 pounds, which translates to a single coin weighing 1/10 of a pound. Looking up the Bag of Holding in the basic edition would see the same functionality as the original, although the wording was changed to be a little more streamlined. It reads now, "Sack-sized magic bag, which will hold 10,000 gold pieces or an object up to 10 foot by 5 foot by 3 foot in size. The bag will then weigh 600 gold pieces in weight, or 300 for the gold and no more." Because we are given that 300 coins weighs roughly 30 pounds, and that the Bag of Holding will potentially weigh no more than 600 gold pieces, we can deduce that the maximum weight would be 60 pounds. Now, considering that it can hold up to 10,000 coins, which would in turn weigh outside the bag a total of about 1,000 pounds, plus whatever equipment and whatnot that you put in there, that it can be reduced to a 60-pound maximum, that's still pretty nice. Still, 60 pounds is quite a bit to haul around when delving through dungeons and trying to swing a sword in combat. Consider this. A gallon of milk is just under 9 pounds. Try carrying about 7 gallons around with you the next time you go hiking. That would be the approximate weight of a maxed out Bag of Holding. In the early 1980s, Moldvay's D&D continues the 10 coins equals 1 pound description, but also states that everything is calculated in coin weight instead of pounds, while it also states that the encumbrance rule is optional. We do learn that characters that carry more than 1,600 coins in weight are considered to be overloaded and are not able to move. This would be the equivalent of about 160 pounds. In comes our Bag of Holding again. This time, the description reads, "This item looks like a normal small sack, but will actually hold treasures up to 10,000 coins in weight, but will only weigh 600 coins when full. An item to be placed inside the bag may be no larger than 10 by 5 by 3. An object any larger than that will not fit inside." Now, mechanically, it still functions in reducing the overall weight, and still maxes out at 600 coins in weight, or 60 pounds. In 1983, however, we would see a bit of a change in the Bag of Holding's functionality. BECMI stands for Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, and Immortals. Essentially, it was a progressional level of difficulty in playing Dungeons & Dragons. Not in terms of how complex the game was to actually play, but rather in the difficulty of encounters and obstacles. These were boxed sets that, as you grew in levels, you'd face off against stronger and stronger foes, and would eventually see your characters become godlike beings themselves. In the basic rulebook, It upped the overloaded weight, where you could no longer move up to 240 pounds or 2,400 coins, whereas previously it was 1,600. In this version, our bag of holding adds a new function. The description reads, "This item looks like a normal small sack, but anything placed within disappears. Anyone may reach in and find the contents by touch. The bag will actually hold treasures up to 10,000 coins in weight, but will only weigh 600 coins when full." The rest of the description cites the size restrictions, which haven't changed from the previous editions. What's interesting here is that you can toss items in and simply reach in and grab what is needed just by touch. When the bag of holding is introduced for advanced Dungeons & Dragons, that's where we're going to see some major changes. While we would see two covers for AD&D, one with an Ifrit on the cover and another with a green-robed Dungeon Master on the cover, the description for the bag of holding found inside would remain the same across both books. It simply reads, "As with other magic bags, this one appears to be a common cloth sack of about 2 foot by 4 foot size. The bag of holding opens into a non-dimensional space, and its inside is larger than its outside dimensions." Sounds like a TARDIS to me. Regardless of what is put into this item, the bag's weight limit, its contents, and its volume content are dependent upon its quality as shown below. Then we get a nice little table that will let the DM randomly roll a percentile or a D100 to determine how much the corresponding bag will hold. Now, I like that the bag of holding was expanded here to have a variety of possible sizes. I like the option. And now it continues to say, "If overloaded or sharp objects are placed within so as to pierce it, the bag will rupture and be ruined, and the contents will be lost forever in the vortices of nil space." While we don't see any other reference to the term nil space, later editions of D&D would define that space to be the astral plane, but more on that in a bit. The second edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons would go on to clarify specifically that it's a percentile roll that you would be making, but otherwise the rest of the description, along with the shown table, would remain the same. Now, I would be remiss if I also didn't bring up that in the early 90s, we would also see the bag of holding be depicted in a collector's card form, and it is this specific card that helped to cement in my mind's eye as to what it would actually look like. I mean, yes, I think we can all imagine what a large brown sack visually looks like, but this really made it take form in my mind's eye. The back of the card would also list out the same information that we got in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which made this series of cards really fun to have for reference, as there were a lot of other magic items, NPCs, and monsters also depicted in this collector set as well. This card would also lend heavily into me changing its overall size of 2 foot by 4 foot down to something a bit more manageable. I mean, while it will still reduce the overall weight of what's inside, something that's 4 foot by 2 foot is still pretty damn big and likely is just going to get in the way. And I get that it's a fantasy game, but hey, DM's prerogative. So I made the bag of holding that show all the ones that show up in my game. I just made them smaller. It still functions the exact same. They're just physically smaller. But 3rd edition's version of the bag of holding, well, that's going to change how it functions forever. Initially, 3rd edition's bag of holding reads much like the 2nd edition's did. It's still a common cloth sack, it's still about 2 foot by 4 foot in size, but now it's been made so that there are 4 types of bags, and in looking at the table listed, we can see that they otherwise mimic the same limits as what we saw in 2nd edition. While it no longer provides a percentile result, it wasn't terribly difficult for the DM to roll a percentile should they want to randomly pick one. Otherwise, they were free to drop, whatever size they wanted. But this is where things would take a dramatic turn. The rest of the description reads, "If the bag is overloaded, or if sharp objects pierce it from inside or outside, the bag ruptures and is ruined. all contents are lost forever. If a bag of holding is turned inside out, its contents spill out unharmed, but the bag must be put right before it can be used again. And this is another new fun part. If living creatures are placed within the bag, they can survive for up to 10 minutes, after which time they suffocate. Retrieving a specific item from a bag of holding is a move-equivalent action, unless the bag contains more than an ordinary backpack would hold, in which case retrieving a specific item is a full round action. But wait, there's more. If a bag of holding is placed within a portable hole, a rift to the astral plane is torn in the space. Bag and hole alike are sucked into the void and forever lost. If a portable hole is placed within a bag of holding, it opens a gate to the astral plane. The hole, the bag, and any creatures within a 10-foot radius are drawn there, destroying the portable hole and the bag of holding in the process. It also lists out the requirements should a character want to try to make a bag of holding. That's important, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so there's a bit to unpack here. For the first time since the bag of holding was introduced, we are getting some nuances to what all happens to it under certain conditions. It was a magic item that became a staple for many adventures back in the day, and I think that was fully recognized by the time 3rd edition was introduced. So in turn, they really fleshed out the bag of holding and provided to it a small touch of lore. The version that we would get in 3.5 would be the same as how it appeared in the base 3rd edition. But up to this point, all descriptions of the bag of holding that we've gone over has been found in the corresponding edition's Dungeon Master's Guide. In 4th edition, it was moved to the Player's Handbook. 4th edition categorizes the bag of holding as a wondrous magic item and greatly reduces its description. It simply reads, "This bag can hold up to 200 pounds in weight or 20 cubic feet in volume, but it always weighs only 1 pound. Drawing an item from a bag of holding is a minor action." And that's it. Yeah, this segment of the bag of holding was kind of short, as that's really all there is for 4th edition. But 5th edition? We've got a fair amount to go over. Fifth edition's version changes the overall look of the bag of holding, changing it from a plain brown sack to something more purse-like. I gotta admit, I didn't like the look of it, so at my table a bag of holding is always going to retain the original brown sack-like appearance. Of course, we also get hints that there are various overall designs for bags of holding, that they can look different based on who made them and what region that they came from. But as I mentioned previously, all the ones in my game and at my table, they're all going to look like the traditional brown sack, like we saw in that card, which is why I can't help but feel that the bag of holding that we have in 5th edition is a fake. I'm a traditionalist. What can I say? In 5th edition, the mechanical description returns, in part to how we saw it from 3rd edition, but it does keep its wondrous status like what we saw in 4th edition. It can now hold up to 500 pounds without exceeding a volume of 64 cubic feet, and will always weigh 15 pounds regardless of weight, which I feel is a far better weight to slug around for the average adventurer. It's more than just the 1 pound from 4th edition, but far less than the 60 pounds that we saw back in the early days. It further goes on to add to the 3rd edition lore of ripping a hole to the astral plane, that anyone within 10 feet is actually sucked into a random place on the astral plane, as opposed to simply being drawn towards that rift. Once everything within that 10-foot area is sucked in, the gate closes and cannot be reopened, mainly because the bag itself was obliterated. Now, there is a little in-between edition stuff that I want to bring up. But first, I want to check out the bag of holding from the 2024 version of the 5th edition. And we'll return to that in-between part in just a moment. The only major update that we get in the 2024 version is that the bag now weighs 5 pounds instead of 15. They also add that to get anything out of it requires the utilize action, but otherwise there was really no other major change. Okay, so the in-between element that I really wanted to bring up. In Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which came out in 2021, we would get a major bump in the Bag of Holding's lore, specifically in the form of a way to use it in a horror-based adventure, involving a creature simply known as the Bagman. When I ran across this passage, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker, and went out of my way to develop this creature even further. The Bagman is considered to be an urban legend. An adventurer and his party were facing certain doom. He abandoned his party and hid inside his bag of holding. Normally, we know that he would have about 10 minutes of breathing time, but something happened that would prolong his stay. When he tried to leave, he simply could not find the opening. Over time, the magics of the bag would transform this poor soul into what we now know as the Bagman. It is said that he can move between any bag of holding out there, and should he make a visit to your bag of holding, you will likely find some piece of random junk within that you had never put there. The legend also states that he continues to search for his home, for the spot where he initially entered to hide within, but when he does find an opening, that if it's not his home, then he will drag someone back into the bag with him. The concept of this, for me, exploded my creativity, as almost every party at almost any given table that I've run has found a bag of holding, and I have introduced this forever marching forward entity, kind of like that of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or even Art the Clown for the more recent crowd of horror fans. This Bagman pushed all my buttons on the "this is cool" list, and I've had him emerge and pull players in from time to time ever since. This is also the major reason why I prefer the classic brown sack-like look as opposed to the purse-like look for the bag of holding. It just gives off that more innocence appearance, but also, it comes across as is this just an ordinary bag sitting in the corner, or is there something else to it kind of vibe? Over the various incarnations of the game, we would see the bag of holding pop up in other places. Dragon Magazine, Dungeon Magazine, lots of novels, of course as magic items in many different modules. One even appeared in the latest D&D movie, Honor Among Thieves. Of course, we would also see physical representations of the bag in our real world, but none of those depictions really expanded the lore of it like what we have seen in 5th edition. The bag of holding has gone from a mechanical workaround for encumbrance to really kind of more of a staple of magical convenience. Of course, it's also become, at least at my table, an object for storytelling and horror. Its appearance has changed over the years, as has its limit in what it can carry, but it's always remained one of the most recognizable items in Dungeons & Dragons. Regardless, I have 2 questions that I want to pose. But first, I really need to thank all of my YouTube members and Patreon supporters, as they have made it so that I didn't need to take on any sponsored ads for today's video, which even if I did have a sponsored ad, we'd all skip it anyways, right? If you'd like to check out becoming a supporter, I'll leave a link down below me here, as well as down in the description. That all said, the bag of holding has never been just a sack. It's something that says we are not ordinary travelers. We are adventurers in search of the sweet, sweet loots. It's generally the first magic item that many parties ever find, and it's almost always ready to carry what you find. Whether you are stuffing it with dungeon loot, storing the head of a defeated demon inside, or nervously watching it during a long rest because you can swear it was twitching. The bag of holding is more than a container. It holds potential. It holds the unknown. And sometimes it holds something that's been waiting to find its way home. My questions, one for DMs and one for players. Dungeon Masters, what's the weirdest or most unsettling thing your players have ever put inside their bag of holding? Players, what would you do if in the middle of your next session, your bag of holding began to move as if something alive suddenly showed up inside? Let me know down in the comments, and until next our paths cross, may your bag of holding stay light, your loot be plenty, and may nothing ever reach back when you go digging inside. Oh, and watch this video next.